Regular Show is my favorite cartoon ever. And that's saying something, seeing that I've harped on different shows before like Courage and Adventure Time. It's a miracle I haven't brought this one up because this show meant so much to me and has had a significant impact on my life. Buckle up, folks, I'll be talking with rose-tinted, dentures? I think it's time to cut my silence and the jokes and finally break the dam loose. Let's talk about the supposed big three of Cartoon Network in what I consider its golden era. Around the mid-2010s, there were three shows that stood heads and shoulders above the rest. Those were The Amazing World of Gumball, Adventure Time, and of course the focal point of today's Yap session, Regular Show. Now, to make you guys a little bit more involved, let me ask you a question. What do these three shows have in common? That's right, they all have two main protagonists. Good job, firm pat on the butt. Now, these three shows offered different flavors of main characters. Adventure Time had two heroes, brothers, both strong and brave in their own rights, the saviors of Ooo. TAWOG had two goofball students, brothers as well, going on wacky misadventures. Regular Show, on the other hand, to me, offered the two most interesting protagonists of the three. For today, I want to talk about one of them, quite possibly my favorite protagonist in cartoons, period. Mordecai, for what people love to call a kids show, displays so much more complexity than most adult media. God, I hate those terms so much from those people who love to smell their own farts. Anyway, before I give myself a stroke, this character at first glance seems like your typical vessel that we follow the episodes of the show through. From a design standpoint, he is a striking standout to his counterparts in the two other shows I mentioned. Though he does share the blue coloration, which I think is the secret of a successful cartoon, he is by far the sharpest. Where both Finn and Gumball's silhouettes are more rounded and compact, Mordecai has harsher lines, is lankier, and looks like a summer breeze away from being knocked over, and I think this was intentional. As a general rule of character design, giving a character rounder edges softens them in the audience's eyes, making them look friendlier and harmless. An on-the-nose example of this is Pops from the same show. Nothing is rounder than our favorite Wacko, thus no one is friendlier. Both Finn and Gumball have almost no sharp edges, making them easier on the eyes. They are also a lot more square, especially Finn. Again, going back to the general rule of design, a character that has a generally square figure shows stability and strength, which makes sense for hero-type characters that fend off antagonists on the regular. Mordecai is the opposite of this. He has round edges, but the slight sharpness he has on his hands and hair to me conveys that he isn't all good. Partner that with the complete lack of squareness in his figure, it says to us that he isn't all that strong and stable as well. Without a single piece of dialogue or action, we already have a base of who Mordecai is as a character, and characters like these are so interesting to me, conveyed beautifully in arts. I'd love to keep yapping about his design, but sadly I have no artistic bone in my body, so I'ma just stick to what I'm semi-fine at. Mordecai is considered the more rational between him and Rigby. Made abundantly clear in the earlier seasons, he is often the voice of reason whenever Rigby attempts to do something absurd and risky. He has priorities, even a semblance of a goal, unlike his best friend, which makes him more protective of their job, a job that constantly gets threatened. There is nothing regular about the Regular Show. That is actually another title of a video I wanted to make, but I do not want to toil over a 3-hour-long video. There is a running joke about the structure of regular show's episodes, where a seemingly normal circumstance goes tits up after Mordecai and Rigby piss off a god by raking leaves or something. They somehow are always at the center of these existential catastrophes, tangled in cosmic conflicts. It's silly fun, it's what a cartoon should be. The difference is that our heroes never seek them out intentionally. Unlike other shows that revolves around adventuring and fighting, this makes their reaction towards conflict stand out. And often the main thing at stake for these episodes is Mordecai and Rigby's job at a park, trumping even their life in most cases. Which, to someone like me who's working a 9 to 5, it is absolutely relatable. As a kid, I found it completely absurd to fight so much for being paid a minimum wage. But reality gave me a German suplex. Now I could understand Mordecai's constant crash out. As anyone who had to live paycheck to paycheck being an undergrad, that job is something you really had to value. And Mordecai embodies this, doing everything in his power to reel in his own interests to keep his only source of income. Rigby, on the other hand, especially in the earlier season, is rasher, feeding his base desires and constantly tempting Mordecai to give in as well. Whenever Benson asks them to do something, Rigby always complains while Mordecai always voices out that they should just bite the bullet and get it over with. Initially, Rigby was another character I hated. He's too impulsive, stupid, and headstrong, getting Mordecai and the other characters into trouble. And I felt bad for Mordecai. I remember questioning why he still keeps Rigby around. He only serves as another burden to him and his goals. Whenever something bad happens, it was never Mordo's fault. They get attacked by an arcade demon, Rigby's fault. Skips gets transported to the moon, Rigby's fault. They get locked inside the meat freezer, Rigby's fault. It was infuriating to watch as a kid. And I always said that if I was in Mordo's situation, I would have just left him to fend for himself. Which he kinda does in most cases, but they always seem to get back together and beat the odds. Watching it now with a different perspective, I realized that Rigby needed Mordecai. He is the only one capable of keeping Rigby off the streets. Some will say, that's not Mordecai's problem. That's not Mordecai's problem. And, well, some people are like that. Survival of the fittest and live for yourself and all. And that perspective is fine, but we still don't have the full grasp on the factors of their bond to dictate what Mordecai should have done. We were not the ones who experienced this friendship they had that spanned well over 2 decades. It was easy for me to say to just ditch Rigby with the episodes we were given, but those episodes once again were just very short glimpses into what they have been through together. Relationships like that are complex, and Mordecai's determination to stick true with Rigby till the end may seem like a childish moral of the story, but that's how it is in real life. Friendship doesn't always mean you're on the up and up all the time. Rough patches happen and mistakes are done. Giving up on someone sounds easy, especially to an outsider who most probably has only seen the bad side of the relationship. And I'm glad that Mordecai showed boundaries whenever he disagrees with his buddy. Happy that he demonstrated that he was a reliable friend even through frustration and agitation from Rigby's antics. And I'm also happy that when Rigby was in a rough spot, he was there to step up to the situation, cover for their failings, and express that he cares deeply for his friend. With all of this said, Mordecai is sounding like the perfect friend, the perfect protagonist. Well, if that were the case, I wouldn't have made the video. I've seen forums and most of all TikTok videos that dogs on Mordecai, calling him a horrible friend and most of all, a simp. Do I disagree with them? Well, yes and no. It's not that he is all of those things, it's that he was all of those things for too long. Now, what I'm about to do is not defending his actions. I simply want to look at how we got to this point and look at the character itself. PSA, I am a Cro-Magnon and horribly underqualified at doing this. But let's just see where this yap session goes. Leave a like if you like me yapping. People make him out to be the most despicable friend out there, and I get where they are coming from, to be honest. We had clear, cutthroat reasons to hate Rigby in the earlier seasons because he was a loser and he embodied it so well. The thing is, they are both losers. Mordecai is as much of a loser as Rigby. At his core, though he is perceived as the more responsible one, Mordecai was also a slacker. He would also complain along the job and would rather do something else, making him go overboard sometimes and then blaming Rigby for his own actions. He also had somewhat of a superiority complex, and watching the show now, I am seeing it. He may be weak, but he is at least physically stronger than his best friend, which he takes advantage of constantly, highlighted in the episode Death Punch. And as the show progressed, we see him take advantage of this even more, belittling Rigby for his lack of achievements and using that as leverage to get what he wants. All of this without even mentioning the fact that he did literally unalive Rigby in the popularly mentioned episode It's Time. I will admit, he was a bad friend. In the same vein how Rigby was a bad friend. Only at times. Again, they were both irresponsible losers working at a dead-end job, and all they had was each other. They basically grew up together, and people like to ignore the things they do to show that they care about one another. How Mordecai stood up for Rigby in the excellent episode, or how he would find a way to get him out of the situation he puts himself in about half of the first few seasons. And also how Rigby tries his best to right his wrongs in almost every episode, and how he would cover for Mordecai when it was him that needed help. They knew the ins and outs of each other. We don't really know the extent of their relationship, and again, we just catch mere glimpses of their bond. Mordecai and Rigby can both be jerks to one another. This friction drives them to overcome each other in either games, girls, achievements, and whatnot. But by the end of the day, the status quo would go back to how it was. Both of them stuck as two irresponsible losers working at a dead-end job. So what happens if that status quo breaks and one gets left behind? Rigby is one of the most well-developed characters in cartoon history. Everyone collectively hated him, the audience and the in-universe characters, because of all the things I've mentioned so far about him. But slowly as the seasons rolled, he changed. He manned up against his family, dealt with his insecurity against his younger brother, got over his issues against his dad, graduated high school for the woman he loved. Rigby was succeeding in life. He became responsible. Mordecai, on the other hand, lost this leverage against Rigby and was left as the only loser. I will not defend his actions in the episode where Rigby graduated. It was bitter and cruel, and he was just a textbook jerk about it. And people rightfully hated him for that. But I think it is hypocritical to say that we would never be like that. Again, it is easy for us to judge what we ourselves have not experienced. It is easy for us to say that we would have done something different. That story was meant as a cautionary tale, and the audience of the show, predominantly kids, would look at it and say, yes, what he did was bad. But what Mordecai felt at that moment is not something you can just say, I would never feel that. I would never feel that, bro. I would never feel that. I would never do the things that he did. Because what he went through and the resulting toxicity he created came from something very human. By this point, Mordecai was at his absolute lowest, and seeing his best friend, the guy who throughout the show was a slacker beneath Mordecai's level, succeeding in life, whereas he, the one who actually had aspirations and at least tried to put in the effort, was still at the same spot as he had been since the beginning. It was too much for him. Partly it was his fault. His poor decisions led him to this point. For most of his life, Mordecai has battled with insecurities, the awkwardness of high school, his failings in art school. They stuck with him all throughout the show, and in this episode, all of those negative traits exploded. Is it bad that he felt that way? Yes. It was once again selfish and bitter. No matter the issues he had in the past, he is not justified to take it out on someone else. But was it not understandable? Was it not human to feel as if you had been punished with these circumstances you have now? Was it not human to feel jealous? And those questions and the ensuing debate that would inevitably erupt in the comment section stands as the testament at how complex this cartoon character really is. In the end, Mordecai did own up to his mistakes, to his bitterness and resentment. He thought that now that his friend has achieved all of this, he no longer needs him. But Rigby still does. And above all, I think in this episode, Mordecai needed Rigby more. And we, the audience, realized that he needed him too all along. In his own way, Rigby looked after Mordecai as well, especially when Mordecai has his brain reverted to caveman instincts whenever he sees... Mordecai was a simp. I will just say straight up, in spite of the many cosmic threats that the duo face on the daily, nothing was more devastating in the life of Mordecai than his relationship with Margaret and consequently CJ. From the first ever episode we get to see the two interact, we know that this would not end well for our Blue Jay. And people have rightfully called out his behavior regarding his romantic relationships. He is the pure embodiment of what we like to call as white knights. The old nomenclature of a simp. I feel old. Watching him struggle around Margaret was painful. The awkwardness, the attitude of sacrificing any means just to get a crumb of attention from her. Hell, she was even the crux of why Mordecai unalived Rigby. Because of jealousy. Though I want to point out that in that episode, Rigby did go too far in my opinion, and he actually was the one who pushed first. Anyway, Margaret was the ultimate threat to Mordecai. Transcending time and space itself, transcending even his objectively better relationship with CJ. When they first got paired up, Mordecai was head over heels for Margaret, literally turning into a lobotomite and drooling all over the thought of getting with her. It's no surprise then that even after multiple boyfriends, Mordecai is still there hoping for a chance. Sadder still is that this took priority over his job, over his friend, over his morals. It was honestly a pathetic display of a lack of any self-respect. And this stretched on for ages, years probably. I'm not quite sure on the timeline. By the time Mordecai finally had a shot with Margaret, it was at the worst time possible. See, in the episode Stake Me Amadeus, their relationship did develop and he was about to ask Margaret to officially be his girlfriend. It was all sunshine and rainbows before that point, and it seemed like it's a no-brainer that Margaret would say yes. But unlike Mordecai, she had other priorities. She was moving to a different state, to a different college to study, and she put that as her number one priority. This, of course, devastated Mordecai. The love of his life, a person he put at the very top of his priorities, rejecting him for her dreams. To someone who is peering from the outside, this seems reasonable. But to Mordecai, at that moment, that was when everything came crashing down. Though it was shown briefly, Mordecai's grief is one of the most significant portrayals of emotional turmoil in my life. Not only was the lingering depressive slump of losing someone important a caricature of what it truly feels, but also what happens after it has been plastered over. Relapse is something not commonly talked about when it comes to fictional relationships. It honestly feels more like a tool in most stories for a momentary tension. In regular show, and especially in Mordecai's case, it is a core part of his character arc. Because right after Mordecai got dumped by Margaret, he found his way back to an old interest. I will never forgive Mordecai for fumbling CJ. Not once, not twice, but 3 times did he sin egregiously against our favorite clown girl. CJ was nothing but patient with their relationship. She was far more active in Mordecai's life than Margaret was, and it was honestly a nice, clean romance. And this is what I think was the reason they did not work out. People dog on Mordecai for still having feelings for Margaret. Rightfully so, mind you. That episode with the mistletoe, yeah, Mordecai was entirely wrong and stupid for that, and he deserves all the hate for it. But let's set that aside for now, because that to me is what made Mordecai such an interesting case to study. People don't get how he wound up at that point, and the main reason I think is that they dismiss that again as something they would never do, which simplifies the complexity of the emotion Mordecai was going through. For the entirety of the show, Mordecai chased something that he believed was far beyond his level, a prize basically. He struggled and fought, and eventually he had a taste of that forbidden fruit before it was ripped away from him once more. A crush turned into love, love turned into obsession. And that was what was missing from his relationship with CJ. In his mind, love was something to be earned, to be chased, romanticized because of his experience with Margaret. And the wound never healed. He clearly hasn't moved on from Margaret. Instead of closing the wound, he plastered CJ on top like a band-aid. After what seems to be a short amount of time, and when the forbidden fruit dangled lower from the branch, he took another bite. A rebound. Again, he is wrong and he should get hate for what he did. But it wasn't unbelievable that he did those things. What was unbelievable was that even in his stupidity, he caught on almost immediately and ran back to CJ. Bless her heart, she did take him back, but the threat now was not Mordecai's stupidity, it was Margaret's. I think she shares much of the blame for confusing Mordecai, and people sometimes ignore that. Mordecai and CJ were finally stable, then she had to tempt and stir up Mordecai with her feelings. If you tell me that if you were in the same situation you wouldn't have a hard time, well, I think you're just lying. Again, it's so easy to say that you wouldn't do that, so easy to not be human. Now, for Mordecai's grandest act of selfishness, upstaging Muscle Man's wedding to just say he is confused, I have nothing for this one. Muscle Man had all the right to powerbomb him straight to hell with that stunt. Yeah, spit on him for that. No, not me, him, not me. So, yeah, Mordecai is, to me, the most flawed and complex protagonist in cartoon history. Something that I think I needed growing up. Understanding that people too in real life are like that. That we are not all round edges, not all of us has a square structure. We too have our sharp lines, our sins along with our good. Mordecai shows us the struggles of normal life in a world full of absurd, extraordinary challenges. He shows us the upside of being consistent and the curse of stagnation, the complexities of love and friendship. Plato defined human as a featherless biped. There's a joke there somewhere. There are more corners that I want to explore about him, but most of you already clicked off the video 20 minutes ago, so let's leave that for next time. If you're still here, first off, why? Second, consider subscribing and watching my other videos. They're there for white noise, so yeah, see ya.